So now we're going to look at using Google Fonts again. I know we already visited this once, but now that you have a deeper understanding, a more thorough understanding of how we work with styles and CSS and link to style sheets and then start using style sheets, I want to revisit this just so you have all of the fundamentals really well. And then also I want to look at a few new CSS properties. So remember that when we're writing CSS, we have our rule sets, and our rule sets are made up of a selector and then a declaration block. And then inside the declaration block, so a block is anything in curly braces, inside the declaration block we have the declaration. And the declaration is some property. I got the right side, I got that time. That should be your right. Yeah, it should be reading left to right for you now. So inside the declaration block, we have declarations. A declaration has a property and then a value. All right. It's weird trying to get that straight in my head. So we're going to look at a few new properties, and the new properties we're going to look at are font family, font size, background color, text shadow, margin, and then we'll set it to 0 auto, and text align. And we're going to do that so that, first we could get something like this. And so we did this with font family. We set a different font family. So we said, hey, give me a different font family. And then we set different font size, so we have different sizes. And then we have a background color, this bright green. And then we have some text shadow, so I applied some text shadow right there. And then margin 0 auto. I took all of that and I said, let's align it in the center. Well, this got aligned in the center, and so did this big element out here. But it didn't have the effect I wanted because I wanted the text in the center. So even though this big element right here became centered, the text was still over on the left. So how do I get that text into the center? So to do that, I'm going to use the text align. So margin auto puts things into the center. And to do that, I'm going to use the text align. So when I could take that border off and text align center and then hit refresh, and it puts it into the center, right? And if I get rid of that border now, you can see this is still in the exact same place. The big box around it, that's the H1 box. And we see, everything in web pages is in a box. And so you can see those boxes here now that we've put borders around that. And we're going to talk about the box model next, how everything is a box on a web page. But so that aligned the text in the center, and then I could come back here and I could just get rid of that border. So the page looks like this now. And that looks pretty nice, So that's what we're going to learn in this video. So let's look at these different properties and how we use Google Fonts to do that. So the first thing, and we already saw this, is you could go to Google Fonts, and I'll just do a quick review. And at Google Fonts, you could search for different fonts. And I like to just look at the different categories and kind of like check on or off which ones I want to think about using or not using. And so there would be like the handwriting ones. And if I wanted to use this handwriting, I could change the text that's displayed. So the motto or a company name I'm thinking of using, and that would be like Acme Co. or whatever. I could look to see, okay, what's that going to look like? And then I could say, oh, I like this one, add to collection. And I just use, and then it's going to give me the link that I include, right? And it's a style sheet, right? So it's linking to an external style sheet, and the external style sheet is at this location. So we're going to get that code for the style sheet, and then we have to include font family. We have to include font family as this would be one of our declarations in CSS. And so this declaration would be applied to some element or all of the elements on the page. And elements and tags are interchangeable. And this is the property, and then these are the values. And so by default, it's going to try to use Indie Flower, which is the font. This font, Indie Flower, is the font. So it's going to try to use that. And if it can't use that, it'll use cursive. So it just goes through this list and tries to use that one, and then if it can't use it, uses that one. So here's an example. They give you an example of how you might apply that. Font family, right? And it's not the name of the font right here, but here's an example. And here's the selector, and then the declaration block. And then here is the declaration. It's on 2 lines. And then there's one more line right here that got added in font weight, right? So 2 declarations. And the declaration has the property and then also the value. So hopefully the more I say this, the more it's sort of cementing in for you, just using that terminology, because that's the way you need to think about it and know those parts of it. So we go and we get that font. And let's just look at the first page. How was that done? And I included this just straight. I embedded it. So instead of linking to an external style sheet, I embedded this internally in the page. I did that with the style tag. And that has to be within the head right here. So it's up in the head. And I put my style tag in. And then now that my style tag's in, I can start putting in declaration blocks. And so declaration block has the rule set has the selector and the declaration block. So I can start putting in rule sets. And a rule set has the selector and the declaration block. And so one of the ones that I put in is for all H1s. I want the font size to be 120. For all H1s and paragraphs, I want the font family to be Grape Vibes. Right, so we see font size and font size right there. We see font family right here, so choosing the font family. Here's where I set text shadow. Now these settings might be a little funny. Just look them up, MDN, CSS, text shadow, and it'll tell you what each of those settings do, like how much to shift it, what color it should be, how wide it should be. That's kind of what it is, right? And I've set my paragraphs to have a certain width of only 1200 pixels, so they're not going to go across the whole page if the page is bigger than that. And I've given them a border, and I've set a background color for the whole page. So you could kind of see how that works. If I wanted to apply something to all elements, and this is something that generally speaking you should not do because it has a pretty large performance impact about how quickly do we get our page to a user. And generally speaking, you want your page to be to a user in under 1 second. From the time they go to your website to the time they see the page, less than a second. And if you use select all elements, right, all tags on the page, that has a big cost. But I could have also just put that right up here, and it would have applied the font to all elements, all tags on the page. So that would have been to select everything on the page. That would have been the star is the select everything selector. All right, so the difference between this page right here, which is this first one, and this next page, which is this one, is that I have also added in margin, zero auto, and text align center to both my heading and my paragraph. And doing that allows this to be centered. So this box right here with a paragraph in it is centered. And the paragraph is only a certain width, right? I called it 1200 pixels. So there's my paragraph width, 1200 pixels for my paragraph. And because it's only 1200 pixels, it puts it into the middle. And this one up here, if I put that border back on right there, so that's for H1, that H1 is the whole page, right? And so it can't center that. If I'd made that H1 a little bit less width, 1400 pixels. Right, you can see, oh, now it's getting centered. Let me make it 1300 pixels. Because when it's the whole width, it's centered, but you can't tell because it's still the whole page, right? But the text still isn't centered, even though this is centered. So without text align, okay, great. I've centered the H1 box, but there's only a little text in it. Text starts over at the left, and so that text is still starting at the left. And so to get that text into the center, I had to do text align center. And so that's how we got things centered up on the page. Now that's going to be important when we do this Mozilla example. We're setting a width here on this container, and we're centering that, right? And so that's how we're putting that container right in the center of the page. So we'll see that when we get to the Mozilla example. Now why does this right here center it? Well, there's margin. And margin is, what is the margin around an element, a box? Everything is box. And so we have a box, and it could have a margin around it. So let me show you a picture of that. Oh, there was Wikipedia. Oh, CSS3 schools, W3 schools, CSS W3 schools. All right, so here's content, right? Here's padding, and so that's the area between the content and the border. Here's border, and here's margin. So margin has a top, a right, a bottom, and a left, right? They all do, but we're just talking about margin here. So our margin has a top, right, bottom, left. I could have put the values in like that. Top, right, bottom, left, and specified each of the margins. So I could have had 10 pixels, 8 pixels, 0 pixels, 10 pixels. And not had TRBL. And that would have been the top, the right, the bottom, the left. And you remember it goes in that order because TRBL is trouble. Right? So that's one way you could set the margin is trouble. And I'm just going to move this down here, duplicate it, and comment it out so that that's something you remember. And then one more way we could do it would be like this. And this one is top, bottom. No, top, bottom, right, left. So I'll duplicate this one, comment it out, and move it up. So when we just have two settings, it's top and bottom, right and left. So top and bottom would each be 10 pixels, and right and left would be 8 pixels. And then if we had this setting, this one is top, right, bottom, left, all of them. There we go. So those are the different ways that we could do settings when we're talking about the four sides of something, right? And then so we had before margin 0 auto. So the top and bottom were 0, no margin on top and bottom. And the right and left are auto. So auto is one of the settings where make them equal. Automatically on each side, make them equal. So when we do that and we have something which is not the width of the page, so this container here that's orange in the background is not the width of the page. So we say the margin on the top and the bottom, it's 0. There's no margin there. And then the margin on the right and left, just distribute it equally, automatically distribute it equally. Okay, make it equal, and it takes that thing which is less than the size of the page and puts it in the middle of the page. So that's how margin 0 auto centers a container, or one of these boxes. Everything on a web page is a box. It centers it in the center of a page. When that box is smaller than the page, it'll take that and put it in the center of the page when you have margin 0 auto. And these are the different ways that we set all the margins at once, or the top and bottom, right and left being the same, or each one individually, right? Each one individually. And then we also have auto as a choice. So you've learned some really great things in this video. And what you've learned is that we could use Google Fonts. And to do that, we have to set font family. And we could set that to everything on the page with a star selector. But that star selector has a performance impact. And then we could also change font size and background color and text shadow. And we could center a container, a box. Everything on a web page is a box. We could center it in the center of a page with margin 0 auto. You learned about the different ways that we set the properties when we have 4 properties to set on an object, a box, one of these boxes on a page. We could do it in these different ways right here. And we could also use this one right here. And then you also learned text align. We'll take the text inside of a container and align it in a certain way. And we aligned it center. So those are some really great things to have picked up. And this video might take a little bit of time to synthesize. You have these files to look through in 18. I encourage you to look through it and then play with those settings. Go in there, create another page, apply each of those settings individually, use the settings. That's the only way you're going to create that muscle memory and reinforce those neural pathways in your brain to just sort of ingrain into your head how these things work, is to use them. So I really encourage you to take time and use each of these settings. Go create a page and use each of these settings and play with them. And then once you've done that, come back and they'll have prepared you really well for this next video where we're going to talk about the box model. All right, so that's fantastic. We learned, I'm excited for you. because that material right there is another huge layer in this foundation which you're building for creating websites and learning how to do web programming. And it's really good stuff, just those properties right there. All right, so in the next video, we're moving on to the box model.